Good evening, everyone. It is 7 p.m. in Hermosa Beach, California. I hereby call to order the February 2025 Planning Commission meeting. If I could everyone stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Commissioner Flaherty.
It's my honor. Thank you. Place your hand over your heart.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you, sir. May we have the roll call, please?
Commissioner Hoffman,
Here.
Commissioner Flaherty,
Here.
Commissioner Izan,
Here.
Vice Chair Hirsch,
Here.
Chair Peterson.
Here.
You have a quorum.
All right, thank you. Moving on to item 4, approval of agenda. This is the time for Planning Commission to discuss any changes to tonight's lengthy agenda and the order thereof. Does anyone have any changes they wish to make? If not, I'll entertain an order to, or a motion to approve.
No for me.
No. Move to approve?
Second.
Okay, I have a motion to approve and a second. May we have a vote, please? We're going to vote electronically.
Voting is open. Motion carries 5-0.
All right, thank you. On now to public comment. This is the time for members of the public to address the Planning Commission on any items within our jurisdiction, and any items where public comment will not be taken. I will note that we do have a public hearing just a few minutes from now. Public comment is limited in this section to 2 minutes per speaker and shall only be taken from those present in the council chambers. No remote public comment will be taken during this time unless required by the Brown Act. A total of 30 minutes will be allocated to this initial public participation item. This time allotment may be modified by the chair. No action will be taken on matters raised during public comment, except that the Planning Commission may take action to schedule issues raised during public comment for a future agenda. Speakers with comments regarding city management or departmental operations are encouraged to submit those comments directly to the Community Development Director or its city manager's office. Do we have anyone here who wishes to provide public comment at this time? Seeing none, I will close public comment. And note that item 11, given the brevity of item 5, is no longer needed for tonight. Moving on to item 6 for our consent calendar. The following items, we have 2 of them, will be acted upon collectively with a single motion and vote to approve with the majority consent of the Planning Commission. If someone wishes to pull it or make a no vote on a separate item, they may, I believe. So we have 2 items. One is the action minutes from our last meeting. The other is the receive and file on the triennial report, noting that this is a receive and file, and then at the next meeting, item 6B would be discussed in a public hearing. Do I have a motion or any comments on this at this time?
Can I ask a question on the triennial report without pulling it?
Sure can.
I just noticed that in the last report, the grant that we have with the police department and ABC was October 2023 to September 2024. Has that been renewed, and or is that going to affect these reports going forward?
I don't have that information. I don't know if, we could report back, I think,
Okay,
on this one.
Thanks.
All right, do we have any other questions or comments? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
I'll move.
Do we have a second? Second. Okay, we have a motion from Vice Chair Hirsch, a second from Commissioner Izant to approve the consent calendar. If we could open voting.
Voting is open. Motion carries 5-0.
All right, thank you. Moving on to item 7, public hearing. Item 7A, request for a zoning text amendment pertaining to the regulation of temporary uses and events for private property, amending Hermosa Beach Municipal Code, Chapter 17.04. Do we have a staff report?
Good evening, Chair Peterson, members of the commission. Alexis Orpeza. I'll be providing the staff presentation on this item, and we'll be pulling up a presentation momentarily. So as that comes up, this is a zone text amendment for temporary uses and temporary regulations. The recommendation is for the Planning Commission to conduct a public hearing, receive a staff report and public comment, and then to determine the project is exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act, and to make a recommendation of approval make a recommendation for the City Council's approval of the zone text amendment, amending Title 17 relating to temporary uses and regulations. As way of background, in 2017, the general plan was updated, and that ensued a process of updating our zoning regulations as well.
We can pause if we want to wait for the presentation, or if that would enhance the quality.
It may.
It may. All right, fair enough. We got time.
Collectively, 30 man hours. No one can see. Sister city meeting last night, remote and in person, and it was like all the worst parts of COVID came flooding back. It was like, oh my God, this didn't work. Could you hear me? It was like, ah.
I thought they had a room at the community center, though. Didn't they have a
No,
room?
they did up at in the museum.
Oh, at the museum. But you were remote, I assume.
No, I was there.
Okay.
If you're there in person.
Yeah. Yeah, anybody else is remote. This stuff's not working. Oh, no, we can't project it. No, you can't hear it. A lot of the people yelling to their mic, can you hear me? Yeah. Go, is that right? Yeah.
It's a disaster.
All right, we appreciate everyone's patience. We're just trying to get the presentation up. Or as Chad and JT would call it, the presentation.
And so, Melanie, is it appearing on your screen, just not up there?
Well,
Yes, it's on Zoom.
Do is you can maybe turn your screen towards the council. I can provide my laptop to the people in the
so they can watch it on Zoom. Chair, I'll defer to your
I mean,
discretion.
surely we have adjudicated and passed motions without
Yeah.
presentations on screens. If we have to, there's no way to get like the Zoom up there. That just seems like a really elegant solution.
I could not agree more, however.
Okay, challenge accepted.
It's funny, because what is this, the first time we've ever had a meeting?
All right.
This is July.
Or,
Here we go.
boom, all right. Patience rewarded. All right, thank you. Onward.
Okay, so zoning text amendment for temporary uses and temporary event regulations, if we can go to the next slide. So as way of background, in 2017, the general plan was updated, and in 2020, a zoning code assessment was completed, identifying improvements to the zoning code with regards to clarity and usability of the code, and to implement the general plan itself. Between 2021 and 2024, a series of study sessions have been conducted and a number of targeted zoning code updates have been completed. In 2024, the zoning code update restarted. Next slide, please. You know what? This is actually the wrong presentation. I think. Hold on. Okay, we're going to keep going. I think it might. We might have a bigger problem. Actually, I might be wrong. Okay, so staff is recommending that the Planning Commission receive a staff presentation, conduct a public hearing, and receive public comments this evening, and then adopt a resolution recommending the City Council's approval of that zone text amendment. Next slide. Okay, I think we're good. In November of 2024, the City Council took action to direct staff to initiate a standalone zone text amendment for temporary uses and temporary events. So that in December of 2024, you all recall a study session was conducted. Planning Commission took public comments and then directed staff to address several key areas, including the quantity of the temporary minor special event permits, allowing for modifications of dates, direction regarding exempting incidental businesses, and then providing parking flexibility were among some of the major themes that were directed of staff to address. So if we can go to the next slide. So Hermosa Beach Municipal Code, Chapter 17.42, allows for a range of temporary uses and temporary events, and those are permitted through the administrative permit process through Chapter 17.55. With this zone text amendment, the various temporary uses and temporary events are proposed to be consolidated under one section, and then the standards and uses the standard and regulations for each of those are enumerated in that single section. The standards that are recommended are intended to prevent and minimize impacts on adjacent properties. If we can go to the next slide. And then, as mentioned, there's two key sections: temporary uses and temporary events. Temporary uses really facilitate the development of property, and the entire section of temporary activities allows for uses and events that might not conform with all of the underlying development standards. So for the area of temporary uses, there is allowances for construction yards that are off-site from the actual location of construction. Temporary use allowance for a residence while the property is being constructed. Storage containers and temporary work trailers, and then a general category in which the director can determine some other use that's similar in scope and to those temporary uses could also be permitted. The other category is the temporary events, which is really special events that are intended to promote businesses and provide community benefit. And we have 5 such categories. There's limited events, temporary minor special events, seasonal sales lots, and outdoor sale events. And then again, we have a similar category where the director can determine that a use that we may not have contemplated is similar enough to the attributes of the temporary events that have been enumerated and could then be permitted. Next slide, please. So for each of the temporary uses and temporary events, there's a list of exceptions that have been carved out. So under temporary uses, things like garage sales, on-site contractor yards, so that's where you have storage need on-site and you also have a building permit on-site that's allowed in conjunction with your building permit. There's not a separate process needed for that. Food trucks at construction sites are also permitted. And then there was real estate office is one that has been newly added, and it was originally required a temporary use permit. And staff feels like that although they're not great in quantity, there still could be a need. So it should remain there, but it can be adequately addressed in conjunction with a building permit. And then we also have exceptions for the temporary event category. These can include events on public school property, temporary events on private property that are approved as part of a special event, a greater special event that's occurring on public property. So those can also obtain an exemption. And then we've added a category for incidental business uses, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later in the presentation.
Can I just quickly note to staff that a part, I think it should be as part? That
Yes.
doesn't seem like the right word. So if y'all can just change that, since you're probably going to reuse this for a city council presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, sorry to interrupt.
Next slide. So the temporary minor special events is kind of where the bulk of the zone text amendment lies in terms of changes. So these are for temporary events on private property that exceed the scope of the business license and approved on the premise. The event may be either indoors or outdoors. Examples of types of use could include assembly uses, concerts, dances, car shows. Next slide. The proposed permit duration is 1 year from the first event, or 12 months rather, from the first event. So it's a rolling permission, does not have to align with calendar year. The proposed frequency of events for temporary minor special events is proposed to be 18 days, so it's a pool of days that an applicant could use with no more than 3 days consecutively. No more than 2 events per month, with a minimum requirement of 5 days between events. Next slide, please. A modification allowance has been added to address changes of date that may be needed for inclement weather or other unforeseen circumstances, and then modification to allow for additional dates. And both of these have been recommended to have a nominal fee associated with it, and that can be later decided as what that fee would be. There is provisions for restricted days, and I do want to make note that what is in the staff report, I do have a revision on that. So after further consultation, the recommendation would be to maintain the restrictions, the ability for the police department to restrict days based on public safety needs, but after consultation with the police department, we would like to maintain the prohibited holidays list that's included. So that would be the recommended change from what was presented in the staff report. Next slide, please. So the temporary minor special events are allowed in the C2, C3 SBA zones that allow non-residential uses, and the verbiage in the proposed text amendment has been updated. And then temporary minor special events could also be permitted in the C1, M1, and R zones that have non-residential uses on them. With regards to parking flexibility, we had a lengthy discussion about what was appropriate for temporary minor special events. So this issue was revisited, and the following is what's proposed. All accessible spaces must be maintained in accordance with ADA, the American Disabilities Act. And then there was a gap, so the proposed text said 5 or fewer spaces and then jumped to 10. So there was a gap that needed to be addressed. So I just want to make note that what's proposed is 5 or fewer parking spaces, no additional parking's required, but there is a requirement for promoting alternative modes of transit to parking. And then for 6 or greater parking spaces, when more than 5 spaces are displaced, a temporary parking demand management plan would be required. And that could take various forms to kind of offset the displaced parking. And it could be off-site parking, shared parking, bicycle racks, ride share. So it would be a host of things that could be provided to offset the displaced parking. And then just a catch-all that should the particular event characteristics need a greater demand of parking, then the director would have the authority to add requirements for parking. Next slide. So the proposed zone text amendment adds flexibility for providing restroom access for events. There is also temporary signage revisions to allow for temporary signs to be permitted in conjunction with the temporary minor special event approval, and it's recommended that a separate permit not be required for that. Staff is proposing to maintain the lighting, any lighting provided be shielded. Exceptions to the standards does require a CUP today, and that's proposed to be maintained. I will make note that with work that the Planning Commission has already done, there was a new process created, is not in effect yet, but minor uses permits, MUPs, minor use permits. And in the future, that could be an option instead of a CUP, but that we'll have to have a future discussion, perhaps in March, as part of the commercial uses. So next slide. So staff has also added an incidental use exemption, as mentioned at the outset. And these are for uses that are customary to the primary use, held within the building, and operated as part of the licensed business on site. Incidental uses need to comply with all standards of the municipal code and any conditions of approval of entitlement. Incidental uses also do not include uses that require an entitlement or is regulated by a separate licensing process. And so this was added to kind of get at some of the discussion that was had about game nights, trivia nights, and trying to carve out that space for uses that do not intensify the business, and to be clear that it does not require a special event permit. Along with the regulation changes, several new definitions have been proposed: temporary activities, temporary events, definition for temporary use, incidental use, and then a definition for the coastal zone has also been added. Next slide. So the proposed project is exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act under Section 15061, and none of the special circumstances that would exist that would create an environmental impact. Public noticing was completed, a legal ad published in the Easy Reader, notice is posted on the website, and then public posters were posted at the library, City Hall, and the Community Resources Building. And public comments have been received. They've been forwarded to you, I believe, 4 comments. There are 5 comments by my last count. And then with that, staff is recommending the Planning Commission determine the project exempt and adopt a resolution recommending City Council approval. That concludes staff's presentation. I'm available for questions.
All right, thank you. Do any of my fellow commissioners have questions of staff?
Yes.
All right, Commissioner Flaherty.
Just like to, on page 1 of 16 of the PC resolution, proposed PC resolution, look at the second from the last paragraph. The date, I think, should be February 18th, not February 12th. And then on page 2 of 16, passed, approved, and adopted on this 15th day of October 24. So if you look at those dates, they're just typos. Then the next question I have goes to one of your statements regarding the restricted days. I'm looking at page 8 of 16. First of all, I appreciate both the structures, how you set it up, where you had the orange box so we could read what it was and in the redlining section, but this other section is the word restricted days, the temporary event may, the word may is in there. If indeed after you consulted and you're proposing that those holidays remain as listed, you're not adding or subtracting any more holidays than the St. Patty's Day, Cinco de Mayo, Memorial Day, Labor Day, 4th of July, or New Year's Eve. You're not adding or subtracting from that list?
Correct. So this would be the comprehensive list if, and I would just like to make it clear, I failed to kind of clarify. With the motion, I would ask that the commission make 2 modifications to the draft. The first would be to direct staff to keep the holidays as prohibited, which is not reflected in this draft. And there's no additional days other than what is here that we would be asking for.
Okay. Because it goes down further to say, anyhow, okay, just restructure that restricted day paragraph is what you're going to do. The word may would not be in there.
So it would be a 2-part. There would be other days that could still be restricted
Gotcha.
if there were events that impacted public resources for safety purposes. But there would be a hard blackout on the
Those
listed, yeah, correct.
And the days that you say could appear could be something like another volleyball huge tournament or an ABC show or something like that.
Correct.
Okay. As I move along, I have a handful of other questions. I was able to read all 4 of the letters that I had time to read, and I would like to listen to any of the people who are going to speak tonight before I respond to the letters. But I thought some of their comments were set well with me. So I'd like to do that as the time goes on, and then make comments to those letters or requests from them. But those are the 2 questions I have right now. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Commissioner Hoffman.
Yeah, I'm not real clear on incidental uses and what it is that we're trying to capture, if in fact it's consistent with the business. I'm not sure what it is that, and again, when the slide was up, but they don't need a permit if it's an incidental use that's consistent with the business that's authorized or whatever. How is that incidental then? It may be something that doesn't occur at a regular basis, but it's consistent with the, as I said, I can't find it here off the top of my head, but the definition that you had up on the slide there seemed to me like what we were describing as incidental as part of the normal activities of the business. I mean,
So I was trying to find a space where there are events that are not, like, we talked about game nights, trivia nights, poetry readings, book signings. These are things that can happen without necessarily changing the intensity of the business. So this was an attempt to add clarity that certain events that are low intensity, they may not be the primary use, but are complementary to the business, could be exempt. And if this doesn't meet that, we can go back and refine it, or it can come out if this doesn't capture what was desired by the commission. But that was the intent. It's a ancillary use that doesn't increase the intensity. We talked about, you kind of, oftentimes, I think the city attorney mentioned, can be often not a problem until it grows too big.
all right, if a business, a bar or restaurant that has pool tables that are regularly there, but has a tournament on a particular Friday night, let's say, is that what you would consider an incidental use, or is that?
It depends how the tournament is set up.
Well, and I guess that's the problem, you see,
Right.
I'm having with this. I'm not quite sure at what point. Well, they have music, but tonight they have a special appearance live. I'm.
So a different example would be a dance studio. They often have recitals. We don't require those to get a temporary use permit.
Right, and
It's
my
part of-
reaction would
right.
be, though, but that's not an incident, that's a standard practice, it's like, gymnastics. Anybody who said gymnastics, we're gonna go to those meets, that's just part of that business. I guess that's all I'm saying. I'm just trying to understand what it is we're trying to capture that wouldn't be, if it's consistent with the business, the way I read that.
Yeah,
Mr. Chair, can I jump in on the same question? For example, you listed in the document, you listed everything but the one item that wasn't karaoke night, it was trivia night. And that wasn't in the list that you gave, but it was spoken to many times. And it was one that was, I think, removed from having the operator use it. But how does the operator come to you and find out whether it's incidental or not? Does he actually have to pay a fee to find out if that's what we're talking about then?
So there would be no determination. If you fit within those parameters, I suppose if you were concerned about the event because of the certain size or intensity, then that's probably not an incidental if you're right. But staff would field those questions. Is this a temporary event? Or is this an incidental
Should they be
use?
coming to you before they get a citation?
Yes.
right, but I mean, I will say in all things like this, that our goal is always compliance, that if someone says, hey, I didn't think so, and they posit reasons, at least in my experience since I've been around, we're not here to be draconian, we're not going to be, nope, we got you on that technicality, here's your big citation, it'll be a open, line of communication.
So you expect the business owner to perform, because that was out of, I've never seen it before. I've seen a lot of things from turtle races on down the line, down in Pier Avenue. So anyhow, I guess the best thing to do would be to come in and talk to the staff.
I think that would be the best thing. I think just in terms of administration, we can also do a better job of educating the public about, business community about the various types of permits and when they're required to help them navigate it as well.
I would
Thank you.
just say it's fair to define what an incidental use is. It's also fair to have concerns as we try to delineate what it is, right? And try to make it really simple for a staff or code enforcement to interpret and say, that's what the planning commission meant. So I think, or the city council, I think we're struggling with that. I think that's a reasonable struggle.
And if we're struggling,
Yeah.
then I'd say we've got a problem to codify it. If the
Which-
3 of us or the 5 of us or whatever can't agree,
Which doesn't mean that then everyone can do whatever they want. It means we
No,
need to
obviously not.
somehow find a way
But
to
the
define
definition,
it.
would seem to me, defined it as part of the routine business activities, maybe just an unusual part. But anyway,
Yeah.
all right.
And I think for some reason when we talked about this, we started with like, book signings and poetry readings
Right.
at bookstores, which is such a hot event in Hermosa Beach. But it certainly fit that discussion. Pete, do you have other?
I did have one other that, no, I'm still thinking about this. I'm still trying to understand the restricted day thing. I thought we made progress when we went from prohibited to restricted, and thinking like, for example, Cinco de Mayo may fall on a day that's not a busy day when it comes on a Tuesday, and it might seem that it would be someone on Cypress might in fact have a special event to showcase, Mexican art or whatever, that probably isn't going to be something that would be a problem or problematic. I understand that, we get this constantly, it seems like I'm constantly being browbeaten about these things until I'm responding to the chief of police, not to my idea. Is it the police, the department that came to you and said, we want those dates to be, or was this simply for simplifying, or, I don't understand.
So, yes, we did consult with the police department. The recommendation was for them to be prohibited, including Cinco de Mayo and St.
Right,
Patrick's Day.
Right. As opposed to the other thing, though,
As a-
when I was reading it, when we had it in the former, I'm thinking, well, okay, the problem there is it's going to be first come, first serve. In other words, somebody might come and say, we're going to have a Mexican art show on Cinco de Mayo. No problem. And then the next guy comes in, we're going to have margarita night, and the next guy, and pretty soon the department is overwhelmed, and then it becomes a kind of who comes first. I'm not sure how we could implement that or administer that, but it still seemed to me that a blanket prohibition on special events, especially those that might have a low impact, made sense to me until you brought this up tonight. So we'll see what my fellow commissioners feel. I think that's it for now.
Okay,
Mr. Chair?
I'll note that we have a representative from PD here. I don't know if you're prepared or wish to weigh in on what we just talked about, or
You've met,
if you'd like to, if that would be helpful to our understanding of this.
Good evening.
thank you.
I'm Eric Cahalan. I'm the patrol operations captain at Hermosa Beach PD. So, yeah, we did have a discussion regarding the temporary special events and the prohibited dates. We certainly understand the idea of enhancing business and giving people opportunities. But when it comes to the public safety aspect of these holidays, historically, calls for service and increased attention is often needed. Memorial Day with our fiesta, 4th of July, as I'm sure we're all very aware of what 4th of July brings, Labor Day weekend. Any of the holidays are going to bring an increase in activity to the city and of course, primarily to our downtown and our businesses. I think, I mean, you make a good argument on restricted for a Tuesday, for a Cinco de Mayo, and maybe that's an area where we could do some research on historical calls for service on weekdays, and make a determination based on that data if we're so impacted on a weekday, St. Patrick's Day or a Cinco de Mayo, where it maybe could be up for discussion on whether or not it's more of a restricted based on the day of the week and the calls for service. But we're certainly going to err on the side of caution when it comes to the public safety aspect and the holidays. All holidays in general, we get an increase. And then, we're talking about restricted. We're going to host the volleyball tournament. Well, we've got to be careful when we're hosting a weekend volleyball tournament. We've got 10, 15, 20,000 people coming that we're also then giving out temporary special events permits in other parts of the city that are now going to require more attention. So those are the concerns. But, yeah.
Okay. Does anyone have questions of PD at this point?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you.
To answer your grant question, if you'd like an answer, in the summertime is when we reapply for the grant. So that grant's going to carry into the end of this, into the middle of this coming summer, and then we will be reapplying. And typically, one of the South Bay agencies carries the grant, and then we all participate. So who's going to carry the grant and who's going to apply for it hasn't been determined yet. We're a little bit early in the year, so we're hopeful that we'll get another grant from ABC, and we'll be able to continue that work.
Okay.
Chairman, I do have one question. Captain, thank you for your time. The other thing is, we did get a letter from a couple of businessmen regarding Labor Day. I thought it was an interesting letter. Labor Day without Fiesta is a different look, for sure. If you could add that into your thought process as you consider the Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday of a Cinco de Mayo or some off day like that, we would appreciate it. I consider this a flexible document that would respond to your reactions if Labor Day turns out to be a non-issue in Hermosa anymore. It could be a business opportunity for the businesses downtown. So thank you, if you could add that to your considerations.
Sounds good, sir.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. You guys are good. Any other questions of staff? Commissioner Isant?
Thank you, Chair. Alexis, in the temporary use section, right now it's proposed for 12 months for a mobile home and 12 months for a work trailer. I'm sure there was some discussion by staff. Why not 18? Why not 24? How did staff arrive at recommending 12?
The 12 months was just a guidepost for how long the initial permit could be, but it is tied to the building permit ultimately. So an extension would be granted, and we didn't want to give an undue excess time for any of these. So it's 12 months, and then it carries with the building permit. And that's kind of the standard. A building permit is 6 months at a time. We didn't want to grant a longer period of time than would be necessary. So the 12 months could come out, and it could just simply say in conjunction with a valid building permit for the same thing. You could massage that a little bit for sure.
So just to further dive down into that, perhaps something then that I didn't know, when my wife and I built our house in Hermosa 6 years ago, single-family residence, was our building permit only 12 months, and Lane then had to go and get a 6-month extension to 18 and then get another 6 months extension because it took us 22 months to build our house? Did they have to file for 2 extensions?
No, it's based on the frequency of your inspection. So an initial permit is good for 6 months, but if you're making inspections along the way, and that continues the life of the permit. So it's kind of a rolling process. But if you did nothing for 6 months, then you would be notified that there's been no action, you're at risk of losing your permit.
Thank you. So like my fellow commissioners before me, I struggle a little bit between the difference between limited events and temporary minor special events. So I'm going to give you a couple of, Counselor, we'll call them hypotheticals. So we're down in the M1 zone, and it is an art gallery. So permitted use is art gallery, and they have openings when a new exhibition comes. Under either of these sections, are they allowed on opening night to have someone playing a guitar and serving wine?
So a limited event is very narrow. The limited event in the M1 zone is for indoor uses, do not involve amplified sound, and do not involve the serving of alcohol. So the limited event would not be the appropriate permit type. However, a temporary minor special event permit can allow for those features of the event that you just mentioned.
So an art gallery then, if they said to themselves, we're going to have, we think over the next year, we're going to have 6 different events, and we want to have wine and a guitar at each one of those, then they would, under this situation, they would file a permit for 6 events that included wine and unamplified music. And would they have to give you specific dates?
Yes, they would have to give specific dates.
All right, but they would do that under minor, minor special event.
Correct.
Okay. So let's take the next one. I think I know the answer to, but I want to bring it up anyway. All right, so you have the hot yoga folks next to the Stars Antiques. And they want to have in their parking lot an event where people are doing yoga outside, and they want to have a band from the 50s called Sweatin' to the Oldies. All right, so under this is a limited special event. Because of the number of parking spaces there, they need to somehow try and come up with some alternative parking elsewhere. Now that we have hardscape on the green belt, they can have a valet and park the cars on the hardscape or something, but that's a minor special event.
That would be a temporary minor special event in the
event.
parking lot.
Okay.
I don't know about the parking on the green belt.
Yeah, really, okay. Last one. So Rockefeller's, and this is a hypothetical, Rockefeller's has a patio area behind their restaurant. Now, they are not allowed to use that based on their CUP that we passed to give them a Type 47 license. So I'm saying this is a hypothetical. We didn't put that limitation on there. They now want to have, because they're sensitive to their neighbors, because it backs up to R2 there, or R1, they want to have amplified music on Friday nights, every single Friday night. Is that a limited special event?
No, they would need to amend their CUP.
I'm sorry, say again?
They would need to amend the CUP in this instance. Because based on the parameters, you're saying every Friday night, that's 52 nights in the year. Based on what's proposed, where the proposal is 18 days.
Let me back off then. They only want to do it for 18 days. Now, they don't need to amend their CUP, but they do need to apply for a temporary minor special event.
And I'm sorry, you may have said a qualifier. Did you qualify that the CUP did not restrict the use of the outdoor area?
That's correct.
Okay.
For this particular hypothetical, I'm modifying what we actually did, which was to restrict that particular area.
So I think based on those parameters, they would be eligible for a temporary minor special event.
Okay, going back to the M1 zone for a moment. It appears that under the temporary uses, no business there can have any kind of an outdoor function. Can they have an outdoor function under the temporary special event application?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I think a minor thing, event frequency. Right now, it's proposed to be 3 hours. Why 3 as opposed to 2 or 4 or 5? This is in section D.
I'm sorry, section D pertaining to temporary minor special events?
Let's see, this is,
No, it's the one before that.
is that the limited one?
Limited events. I think.
Limited event, okay, sorry. Got too many
See.
papers here. Limited event, which is limited to 3 hours for the event. Why 3 as opposed to 2 or 4 or 5?
Thank you for the question. So the 3 hours, actually, these are regulations that were adopted in 2020. This is a carryover as to the work that was done in 2020. Certainly, if there was some desire to change that, if it was at the commission's pleasure to modify that, that could certainly be considered. However, I think if you look at the number of events, it's 36. I think there was some effort to kind of truly make these limited, and it's a 2-year duration. Folks don't have to come in and check with us on these as to when they're providing them. They're given parameters in which they could operate up to 36 times in a year.
In this situation, I was more interested in the duration of the event as opposed to the number of events.
Understand, but I think in terms of intensity, 3 hours, it's small in scale. I think all of those factors is what contributes to why this is limited, why it's a longer permit duration as well. So they're not reviewed annually.
Okay. Just one minor thing. In one of the letters that we received, it says that as part of the process, we need professionally scaled renderings, whereas the ABC requires only a hand-drawn diagram. What level of professionalism do we require for our submissions for the city to review?
I'm sorry, which section is that?
I'm not sure it's a specific section. It's just in one of the letters that we received. It stated that the city requires professionally scaled renderings. Renderings as opposed, rendering to me is a 2-dimensional item as opposed to like just a regular plan.
I'm not aware of us requiring renderings for temporary events at all. We do require dimensions on plans. We often work with what the applicant provides us, which is not always to scale, but we do encourage we need accurate dimensions. They're public life safety reasons why we need to ensure certain clearances, especially if there's seating. So there are reasons why there's a scale asked on applications. However, I can tell you in working with many businesses, we've looked at plans ourselves. We've helped them to ensure they're providing the dimensions, even if it's not scaled, and worked with them through that process.
Well, and I would concur that scale drawings are needed, so perhaps the word rendering in this letter was inappropriately used. Mr. Chairman, that's all I have right now.
All right, thank you. Vice Chair Hirsch.
All right, thank you. I am curious about staff's reasoning around the limited events. Let me back up. It's my interpretation from reading the staff report and the provided text that limited events in the Cypress District are supposed to provide additional opportunities for businesses in this district to have events that are smaller in scale than a minor special event. And the way that it's laid out in the parameters of what's allowed seems pretty restrictive when compared to minor special events. I'm curious about staff's recommendation and police department's recommendation on the restricted days, if these are truly indoor events at capacity, gallery showings and showcases. Are we concerned about their demand on our police team in terms of monitoring and ensuring the safety there? These seem like they're much lower impact events, the way that it's written. So I wanted to understand that.
So yes, in my consultation with the police department, both the temporary minor special events and limited events were recommended to be restricted on those days. And it relates back to public resources, public safety, as mentioned previously.
My next question is with regards to the minor special events. So Commissioner Izant just brought up something that confused me a little bit, the example about the Rockefeller. So we approved a conditional use permit for them with certain parameters that excluded their outdoor rear patio. Is it true that they would not be able to do a temporary minor special event in that rear patio just because of our CUP?
If the parameters preclude us allowing a temporary event that would be contrary to the underlying entitlement. So yes, if it specifically calls out prohibiting that outdoor patio, then they would not be able to obtain a temporary minor special event permit.
But they could in the parking lot, in the back.
There's a parking lot back, I'm sorry,
Yeah, I think, I'm going off memory here, but I'm looking at the aerial. I thought that there was parking associated with
there
that.
may be, I'm
Someone
not.
else's drive, that might be the driveway
Here?
into those homes, maybe, I don't know.
No,
Okay,
this
that
is commercial.
Yeah, you're right, okay.
So, yes, if there was not a restriction, I don't know all of the restrictions on Rockefeller, but seemingly if there's no other restriction about outdoor uses, then conceivably that could be permitted in that location. However, I will also say there is findings associated with that administrative permit. So it's also possible that the reasonings that were used to prohibit the outdoor area, I'm sure it was the proximity to residential. That may also be a reason that the director ultimately decided the findings in this particular case couldn't be supported for that particular situation. It would depend on size, scale, all of those types of things.
So just building on that, do we address proximity to residential in terms of what we are advertising as being allowed for temporary minor special events?
There are no parameters as to proximity in general.
So do we leave it up to staff discretion in terms of, this is too close to a residence, so we're not going to approve it?
So each of the events is evaluated based on what is being proposed. Proximity to residential is considered, but so much of our commercial, right, abuts residential. There's not an outright prohibition on it, but it is a consideration.
Also on temporary minor special events, section 2C, location, we're requiring that the minor special events are all contained on private property. I think I recall that one of the speakers in December brought up that they have an encroachment permit on city property. Are we restricting, should we be restricting, and that's for commission, but is there an opportunity for someone to have a special event on public property if they already have an encroachment permit or some type of permit allowing them to occupy that space?
That's a good question. So the temporary minor special event permit really pertains to private property, as that's the jurisdiction of the zoning code. It's not to say that they couldn't obtain approval from Public Works for some use of the right-of-way in conjunction, but planning staff would not be the ones to authorize the use of the right-of-way in conjunction with a temporary minor special event permit.
Okay, so it would just be through an alternate means of application. Got it. Last question from me for now. So staff is proposing frequency to be up to 18 days in a 12-month period. I believe, or it says right now that the requirement is 12 times in a 12-month period up to 3 consecutive days, so that's 36. So we're essentially cutting the amount of actual days in half from what's currently allowed to what's being proposed.
Correct.
Okay, that's it for me, thank you.
All right. We are still asking questions of staff, and I still got a couple.
Just one
Go
quick
ahead.
one then.
So does Steve, yeah.
Is the complexity expected of the minor event versus the application versus the complexity of the temporary minor event? Is there any, are you able to estimate, is one going to take less staff time to evaluate than the other? Or would you guess that they're both about the same?
I'm sorry, in terms of limited events versus processing temporary minor special event permits?
Yes.
They both go through a similar level of review. They're routed to the various departments, building safety, police department. Many times they also go to Public Works. So that process is the same on either case. So the level of staff time is often the same. It's similar.
Okay, so the expectation then, it might be reasonable to assume that the cost of either one might be similar then, just because it's going to take a similar amount of staff time.
Correct.
Thank you, Chair.
All right, I just have a couple questions. We talk about like outside sales events. Now, when we have sidewalk sales through the chamber, like how are those permitted versus this? Or what is the approval process for that? Because we do have a few of those a year.
I believe the chamber ones are permitted out of community resources, is my belief on that.
Okay, so that's a different process, just trying to differentiate that. One of our letter writers wrote, in the past, I'm quoting, businesses could easily apply and receive approval for 4 to 12 events a year. What process was that relative to this? I'll look to Pete if you don't know.
My understanding, and I don't have, I've been here just a year, but my understanding is that there's been different ways in which the code has been implemented, and maybe some latitudes were sometimes taken and not necessarily followed the letter of the law, trying to,
Okay.
yeah.
That, I was curious about that, and I'm a little confused. Let me see if I have any other. All right, I don't have any other questions of staff, so I will close, if you will, that portion of it. This is a public hearing, so we'll now begin the public comment portion. All questions and comments on this matter are to be directed to the commission, not our audience. Anyone that wishes to come up and speak, you have 3 minutes, even though we know who you are. If you could introduce yourself and sign in, we'd appreciate it.
I want to, first of all, thank staff and the police department. They actually met with us to go over some of our questions. We addressed their concerns, so I do appreciate that. I also want to take a moment to address some of the questions that you had. Commissioner Zant had asked about the site plan. It's on page 2 on the application, where it says a site plan must be to scale. And so that's what we're talking about with that. I have more basic questions about these permits. This is my 6th meeting that I've come to talk about this thing. So one of the questions I'd like to ask Alexis is how many people have applied for these permits? Because if it's 2, 4, 10, we've spent a significant amount of time addressing this. And if we don't have enough applicants for these permits, there's something wrong with the permits. From a business perspective, I would think that nobody wants to buy the product that we're selling. So that would be helpful. The other thing is the mindset going into here, because you have my feedback I've written in, and I'd like to just distinguish the mindset of where we seem to be not meeting. It seems to be that there's a bureaucratic mindset that if we change the frequency, let's say, from 4 to 7 to 18 to 36, we're making progress. That's a bureaucratic mindset. If you're looking at it from a business owner, you're looking at it like, what's the result? What's the outcome? What are we trying to do here? Because picking an arbitrary number is just that, it's an arbitrary number. You may not get to the goal that you're trying to achieve. Some of the goals in Plan Hermosa talk about supporting a robust economy, high quality of life for our residents, a series of unique destinations and commercial districts. And I noticed in our staff reports, we never talk about our economic development strategies. Never. We spent 2 years, 70 meetings. I was in every single one of them. 2 of you were actually on the committee. And there's the opportunity to actually realize some of these strategies that overlap with this very permit that we're discussing tonight. The limited events and temporary special and minor event permits are examples of a few strategies. Number 13, facilitate downtown experiences. Number 16, program to allow outdoor music in public spaces. We could do it with private spaces. Number 25, explore music events and activities to celebrate our history of music. And then 28, streamline the permit process. If we are not looking at ways that we can make this work and that we can create more vibrancy, more foot traffic, what are we doing? The majority of council has agreed and supporting our economic development recommendations that they want more vibrancy, they want more activity. And so I'm just asking, what are we doing and why are we doing it? Right now, and I'm glad, Commissioner Hoffman, you brought up the incidental use, because poetry readings are exempt. Well, if poetry readings are exempt, then rap recitals should be too, because it's a form of poetry. So if that's the case, then the really thing that we're talking about is music, is sound.
I need you to begin to wrap up.
Will do. So if the only difference is background music, it makes more sense to regulate the events based on sound levels rather than blanket permit requirements. Let's take a big picture, let's look at what we're trying to do here, and let's come to some common ground and why we're doing what we're doing. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Laura. Anybody else wish to speak? Mr. Malavani, good evening.
Hello, everybody. Adam Malavani. There's a lot of issues. It's complicated. And as Laura said, I think, that's part of the problem here is it doesn't have to be this complicated. To answer Laura's questions, how many businesses have actually applied for a temporary minor special event permit? It's my understanding there's been 2, maybe 3. I'm not sure, but there's Vista and Uncorked. So why is it that, more people aren't asking for this? I mean, first of all, it's hard to get people to come out to an event, especially in a parking lot, especially if you're charging money. So to put this in perspective, it's like if we make these changes, yes, it's an opportunity to make it better for businesses, and we all know that businesses need help. We just had Waterman's close this weekend, just another one. But it's not like we're gonna open up the floodgates and it's gonna go back to the 80s and punk rockers are gonna be tearing down buildings, which is interesting because I think a lot of these codes came from that time, 40 plus years ago when things were maybe a little out of control. And I think, we've had the mindset, well, let's make it, how can we make it just a little bit better? And that has kind of been my mindset too. Well, it was 4 events. Can we please do 12 events? And then as we start to talk to other businesses and stakeholders in other cities where they don't have these restrictions, where it's a 2-page permit, people are like, yeah, why is it so restrictive? And so I think we have an opportunity here to help make it better. But again, it's like when we met with the city staff and the police department, regarding the parking, it was implied, when I started this over a year ago, it was like, well, why is it a problem to use a parking lot? And people said, well, it must be the Coastal Commission. Well, it's not the Coastal Commission. In fact, Laura found the only thing we found from the Coastal Commission regarding temporary minor special events was a memo they wrote 35 years ago saying we only need to review it if it's on the beach and in the summer and another requirement. So it's not a Coastal Commission, which should wipe out all the parking issues because we're arbitrarily saying this is a problem. And to have an ADA parking spot where you're having a special event, that makes no sense. You got a bunch of people in a parking lot. It's like, wait a second, everybody move out. There's an ADA car coming in. And last thing I'll say is in our meeting with the police department, we were surprised how supportive they were of all of this. And no, they're not overly concerned. Yes, they want to know what's going on, but all minor events are not equal, and if it's 1,000 people at one, okay, they might have a concern, and if it's 20 people at another that happens to fall on a holiday, that's not a problem. So those are things to consider. Thank you very much.
All right.
Adam?
Thank you, Adam. Is there anyone else here that wishes to speak? All right. Out of formality, I'll ask. Do we have anyone phoning in? I think we'll allow.
It appears there are 2 virtual attendees wishing to speak. I will allow the first one to speak, and then once they're done, I will shift to the next one.
Okay. Good evening. If you could identify yourself, and you have 3 minutes. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. It's Jessica Accomando, current chairman of the board of the Hermosa Beach Chamber, and we certainly appreciate the time of the commission tonight. Thank you for accepting comments in such a constructive conversation. I want to extend a thanks to the police department. They did meet with us as referenced, and Alexis, who's put a lot of time into this. But I really want to double down on what Adam and Laura and Kathy Knoll and the rest of the folks in town who are trying to bring events to life, double down on what they're saying. I made a couple points in the conversations tonight that I'll address really quick. Captain spoke about the police example and things with Fiesta. Remember, those are different kinds of event permits. Events that happen on public property are often what we think of when we think of events in this town. What you're considering are events that happen on private property. And so that is a different realm. They're much smaller. They're not fiestas. They're, wine tasting events in the back of Uncorked. So please keep that in mind. And they have very little impact on the police department, as per our discussion that we had in that meeting. I also wanted to bring up, Commissioner Isant brought up Rockefeller as an example, and I believe Kate's question was, does your changes about the CUP affect the ability to do things? And yes, that answer is. So you can imagine why businesses are so afraid of CUP modifications, because that can void their ability to do other things. So I hope that the commission keeps that in mind. I also want to bring to your attention, each time you modify the event permit, so when you apply for the temporary minor special event permit, you pay, right now it's $680-ish. And if you modify the dates on that plan, you have to pay that fee all over again. But I recollect Commissioner Isaiah speaking about his home permit in his building, and the city lets you go longer than a year or lets you extend when the process takes longer. And so I don't understand why, if we're requiring a business to only have to pay once, but pick dates for an entire year, why we can't just allow date changes or date additions. Why can't you apply for the permit for 1 year for 682 that are similar events, and then just provide those dates as the year goes on, and the city just has to check off that it's not a holiday or something like that. I also want to talk about, when have you gone to a small event or a gallery opening or a karaoke night in Resin Art Gallery and not had either a radio that's amplified sound, a microphone, or a karaoke box? Those are all amplified sounds. It seems insane that we won't let people have amplified sound. It would be better to say, to ensure that you're following the municipal code. It's during the noise ordinance hours of the day. Why can't you just say don't exceed 80 decibels from the property line? That would make way more sense. And then last, I'll end with the idea of alcohol. There has been so much drama around alcohol in Hermosa's history. I beg of you not to punish the small businesses in this community because of what has happened in the past. When have you ever gone to a fundraiser, something in the museum on city properties, something at Kiwanis, and not been offered a beer or wine? It seems crazy that we can't have limited permits or small events where legally there can be provided wine by somebody with a catering license or a temporary ABC license. It seems crazy that you have to pay the $680 in order to have alcohol at your event. I appreciate your time. Thank you all very much.
All right, thank you. Do we have anyone else wishing to speak?
Yes, there's one more. I will let them speak now.
All right, good evening. If you could identify yourself, you have 3 minutes.
Yes, this is John David. I didn't have a chance to get my comments in, so I'm just presenting them right now. Regarding the temporary use mobile homes, I heard what Steve Azant said, and I agree. I think we need to extend that period to at least 18 months. Especially with what's happened to wildfires, we really don't know what it's going to take to get contractors and what kind of delays we'll have. I don't know about you, I've heard a billion stories from people where their contractors just went missing for months or they can't get supplies. So I think we really need to be careful about making that too short. The other part about it is I don't understand why they apply to single family residences only. It seems to me having an owner or somebody that cares on premises during construction is a huge bonus for the neighbors, especially for bigger developments, multifamily developments. So I'm not sure why that was done that way. As far as special permits in the C2, I've said it many times, our downtown is in a very slow economic decline. Sales tax and rents aren't keeping up with inflation. At least that's what I think. And both are indicators of economic trouble. So, the downtown is like a big business, and we're troubled business. And troubled businesses, retail businesses, they send out mailers. They bring people into special events to sales. We're no different, and we need to give people a reason to come. and we need to make it really easy for the businesses to do this. This is not just for an individual business; it's for the whole ecosystem. And I don't understand why there's any kind of limit on small-scale events inside businesses. I don't know if that's what's being discussed here, but unless there's a noise nuisance issue, I can't understand why anybody would care what you do inside your business as far as events. I also don't understand why we're limiting any number of events per year. I think we should just, just let businesses be a little more free. I'm not really sure what the fear is and what the unwanted outcomes are. I think there's a bigger fear of people not coming to Hermosa Beach. That's the worst unwanted outcome. I think there's an underlying issue that may be noise pollution, light pollution. I think they can get addressed in a different way than limiting events. I also think you should allow the events to run up to the time of either the business or the underlying zone. I can't understand why in them early. I also think regulating parking plans and parking requirements and having a parking plan on small sites, why you do that. It's an overreach and it's bureaucratic. Downtown has several big parking lots and they seem empty most of the time to me. As far as outdoor sales events, right now our downtown, it's often dead, and except for the plaza, which has a reputation of being a bar scene, I think we need a huge image revamp. We need visitors to come, and nothing says welcome more than activity on the sidewalks. So I really want to see us be careful not to limit things too much. Personally, I'd love to see sidewalk sales once, twice a week. Love it if a shop puts a rack of clothes out, say once a week. That'd make me feel like something's happening there. And I would like to.
John, I need you to wrap up.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I was just going to say I'd love it if things become an issue, the community development director, give them some kind of authority to say, hey, look, let's change things, modify things slightly without having to go in front of the planning commission just because it's such a big issue. Anyhow, thank you very much. I really appreciate you guys listening.
All right. Thank you, sir. Do we have anyone else that is on the line?
No, there are currently no other virtual attendees wishing to speak.
All right, fair enough. So we will bring it back to the commission. It's fair to say we're going to have some kind of edits and modifications and amendments on whatever we pass. Before we start debate on this, I'll just share a few thoughts procedurally. We're considering staff recommendation. We'll make some modifications likely. We'll vote on this and send it to City Council. City Council is ultimately the one that's going to approve this. So I think us having a robust discussion is helpful because I think our questions inform their questions and their thoughts. So I welcome all questions. Err on the side of not filtering so that we can go through this. Also, there is a CUP process. There is also what is it called, an administrative?
Actually, it's minor use permit.
Okay, so there are other ways to have permits. So this is one avenue for that. Given that, who would like to lead us off? And I think we're going to have maybe some version control issues here. So if people have thoughts and then want to sort of parking lot, any amendments or changes that they want to make, I'll welcome that. Mike, do you want to start us off?
Sure. I agree with Steve on the construction trailers, although I find it interesting that all the construction in residential areas that I've seen over the years, I don't remember any resident living in a mobile home while it was being constructed. But speaking of that issue, I do appreciate the staff saying it could be reworked into language similar to the building permit. So I'd like to somehow come up with wording or concept that would work into that arena versus what you have listed now. Secondly, I also agree with some of the speakers in the previous letters that I think the timing of the permit should be opened up a little bit to reflect the noise ordinance. So it should be up to 10 o'clock at night versus 9 and start at whatever time the noise ordinance is. I think it's 8 o'clock to 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. The next is, I agree with the number of days per year being increased. I don't have a feel yet on how many more days to increase, but I would certainly like to have, instead of 4 days, 4 events, 6 events, or something like that. Increase it enough so it has a value for someone to get a permit. I do like the idea of asking the police department to rethink the holidays per year, if indeed some of them have minor issues with Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or something like that. And certainly, I've witnessed I've witnessed Labor Day to be obviously a lot less drama than we've had when we had 30 years of fiesta. So those would be my opening statements. I also want to address the permit process that if you're rejected, you lose the fee. I think there's some value into having one. I thought we talked, the last time we talked about this, the staff was very clear that they would spend much more time with the applicant at the counter and trying to make it so they wouldn't fail. And so I'd like to see some sort of language or something there, or go just the opposite. If it's rejected, return 50% of the fee. Now, that's just a stab in the dark. I have no idea if the council wants to eliminate or give back money to people, even though you spend the same time on that issue. But those are the 3 or 4 things I have to start with.
Okay. Before I turn to our next commissioner, we have a representative from PD here. Does anyone have more questions of our police or that you might anticipate, or can we release him to go chase bad guys?
I don't.
No, I don't anticipate having any more questions.
Nope.
I think we're good. I appreciate your participation. If you find this entertaining, you're welcome to stay. But, you may not. All right, sir. All right. Commissioner Hoffman.
Let's see. I'm not sure where to start. It's a couple of comments generally, though. I hate to sound like an academic, but we're basically all up here debating what's known as the tragedy of the commons or the law of the commons in planning. If we leave everybody to their own devices to access a commodity or resource, it leads to tragedy, unless it's regulated. And of course, that's why we're here. We are, in fact, the regulatory body in this, or at least a recommending body for the regulations here. And John, as he always does, had a very interesting question. Why are we different? And my answer to that's pretty simple. Well, because we're 20,000 people in a mile and a half square. What works in, I don't know where, Antelope, in the Morongo Valley doesn't work here. What works even where I spend a lot of time on the golf course in the desert, in Palm Springs. What works there doesn't work here. So I think we do need to have some regulations and so forth. And again, the idea, well, I'd like to see that every weekend, within that's no longer a special event. That's just part of the normal activities of the business, in which case we should be covering it with a CUP, not with a special event, a kind of a permit. But having said all of that, I think several points that were raised in the letters and the commentary that my fellow commissioners have brought up As Commissioner Flaherty suggested, especially with the M1 is kind of the interesting, the Cypress District is kind of the interesting case. I would agree that in that case, it does not make sense to prohibit music. I would agree that it does not make sense to prohibit alcohol service with the appropriate licensing and so forth in that kind of a thing. I also would disagree that 3 hours, again, any number we pick is going to be arbitrary. So what I would probably suggest is that we move towards consistency, and that is use the same hours that we're using for operating hours and CUPs and those kinds of things, so that rather than just arbitrarily say they can't have a special event more than 3 hours, well, not if their regular business hours and so forth would allow more. And in terms of the number events, which it keeps coming up, yeah, it's going to be arbitrary at whatever number we pick. Can we have the event every Friday night? Should there be an event? It seems to me that's no longer, we're back to that, what was it, incidental use or whatever. That's just an inherent part of the business, in which case, again, we shouldn't be trying to regulate that with a special event permit. Is 18 days too many or too little or not enough? I don't know. But at some point, we're going to have to come up with something, because again, even the Cypress District, which is blessed in a sense by the greenbelt on one side, the break in terrain to the west, 8th Street in a certain extent, 6th in the South Park and so forth, even though it's relative contained, if you tell the folks that live up above on Loma that there's going to be music emanating from the Cypress District every Friday night, I don't think they're going to be happy with that. And that brings us back to what is different with density here. So I've got concerns about the noise issue, about alcohol service, at least as it relates to the M1, the hours, the parking thing. I understand the issue that where it's raised. I'm not sure how we get around with ADA access and so forth. Those are kind of my initial comments, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you. Vice Chair Hirsch.
Sure. I guess I would just offer a different perspective on the temporary uses and the expiration. So, there are situations where, somebody could pull a building permit and call for an inspection every 5 months and 29 days for years, and just have it lingering out there. And I think that goes against what we're trying to achieve. So I would be in favor of, maybe 18 months is the right number, but not tying it completely to the building permit, but maybe writing in some language here to memorialize that so long as the building permit is open, staff, or the permit for the temporary use can be renewed with some discretion, because I think you don't want to have these things lingering out there forever and people taking advantage of it. With regards to the Cypress District, I think I would just also flag for my fellow commissioners, if it's all contained in, if we agree that now I'm lost my page, but the limited use is also limiting to interior uses that have noise control and restricted hours, then maybe there's a way to work on the restricted days if we truly think that these are events that have less impact on the city. And I thought someone brought up, I'll skip that actually. On the parking, with regards to the temporary minor special events, I wonder if 5 is the right number in terms of anchoring us on the parking lots for, taking 5 or fewer spaces doesn't require additional parking, but parking lots that have 6 or more does. I just question whether that number is the right number, whether it should be 10 or something. And I think that's it for now. Thank you. I do agree with my fellow commissioners on most of the other comments that were said, so I'd be supportive of that.
All right, consensus building. Commissioner Azant.
Thank you, Chair Peterson. Before my comments, like I say, my curiosity is going to get the best of me. We've heard several times now that our application is, in terms of number of pages, is just slightly less than when they were printing the Encyclopedia Britannica, whereas Manhattan Beach and Redondo Beach, they have, it's less than a page. Can you please share with us how many pages is our application, and do you have knowledge of the application size of Redondo and Manhattan Beach?
I don't have the exact page numbers.
Roughly. Is it
It's
as thick as
probably
my
about
finger?
10. It's lengthy. It's longer than it needs to be, and upon adoption of new regulations, that will be one of the first things that we, as staff, go back to revisit. It lists many of the code sections and requirements, which adds to the girth of the application, and but we will be looking to streamline that.
Do you have knowledge of the length of the Redondo and Manhattan Beach applications?
I don't know exactly how many pages they are.
Well, they're bigger than us, and if they have less pages, that should be our goal. All right, so anyway, my thoughts. My first thought, fellow commissioners, we had a couple of people challenge us to think outside the box. So here's my first thought. I don't know why we're singling out the poor M1 district, and I don't even know why we need that section. Why do we need that section? They can't do anything outside. They can't have any noise. They can't have any alcohol. So as long as it's inside and they're not exceeding their fire code limit, why do we need this section at all? Just going to throw that out there. Okay. In terms of level of noise, I think it should be the same as the citywide restrictions on noise in terms of decibel levels and when it can start and when it can stop. In terms of holidays, I totally agree of the need for the chief to evaluate the safety of the city. But I'm concerned that if we take out the word may, it is a hard stop. It's in the code. And consequently, Counselor, does the chief then no longer have the ability to waive it if he wants to because it doesn't say may? So I'd make the argument that it would be that the chief may prohibit. Now, it makes it a little more complicated because he has to notify everybody if he thinks it's going to happen. But if you take out the word may, I think he doesn't have the flexibility any longer if there's no problem on a particular holiday or a particular holiday weekend. In terms of the number of days, I think 18 days is too few. I realize I concur with Commissioner Hoffman. We get into what's the right number and who the heck knows, but I believe it's more than 18. And let's see, just to try to cut down on the paperwork, can we just have one application and you have a box at the top that you check that says minor event or temporary special event? Save on some paper there. Let's see. Those are my initial comments. Thank you, Chair.
All right, thank you. What are my comments? I think to Pete's comments about our town and kind of what we're doing, I mean, we do live on top of each other. I don't think our goal here is to try to, inhibit. I think it is just try to manage a town where you have businesses abutting residential. I am sympathetic to, well, let me jump back first. The whole thing about sort of temporary residence on a property that's being built, I struggle to think of a lot that's big enough to have both. That's number one. Number two, we did have a property, it was a commercial property on Hermosa Ave that had an open building permit for about 5 years, and then on the New Year's Eve,
Do a party.
put up a 3-foot tall iron girder. So I was a little curious about that. I do think there needs to be some sort of, coordination with whatever the building permit is. The conversation about having the hours kind of true up to the noise ordinance, that's fine with that. I've always thought that when you have a business here, when you're a taxpayer here, there's certain things that should be included. So I think sometimes our fees are a little sort of high and restrictive in terms of charging businesses for permits, for signs on the sidewalk, those sorts of things. Those were a couple $100. So I'm very sympathetic to refunding fees or some portion thereof. I like that. Specific to the M1, I think that if there was some way to have, if it's inside the business, if they have, reasonable amplified music, and maybe we delineate that where it's like one performer, not like an entire band or something like that. As well, alcohol, that's fine. I think there's some, in terms of the M1 zone, I think there's some kind of tension or conflict there in terms of what people want it to be versus what it is. It's zoned as light industrial that allows, artists and others to make things there on site and then periodically show them, and that's what this does. And those are not assembly uses. I think there's maybe a desire to have sort of quasi-assembly uses there. I don't know, but I think that's where some of the, where we miss the mark. So if there's widespread disagreement on what we're doing there or how lenient we can be, then maybe that's a zoning issue, not a special permit issue. I think there's been, in some of our discussions over the past number of years, there's been concern that if we were overly, liberal in how we interpret or change things down there, that we would threaten the uses that are already there and the rents, et cetera. So I think there's a kind of a balance there that needs to be struck. I think that's it. I would just also say if people aren't applying for these permits, it could be that the process, the fees, the 10-page form is too restrictive. It could be also that there's just not a heck of a lot of demand for this. I mean, that's a plausible scenario. I don't know who's looking at this and saying, nah, I'll pass. So I don't know why we're not getting more interest, but those are my thoughts. Something that wasn't brought around in the second kind of go around, but was in the first, is this challenge of defining an event and what it is and isn't. I'm open to any discussion on that, and as well to sort of wink at city council and say that, any time they spend debating that is probably time well spent. So that's my, because we're gonna have challenges there. Those are my thoughts. If anyone wishes to make a motion, they can. If there's further reflection on their collective eloquence here, and we want to whip around again, we can do that as well. Mike?
I have a question for staff, if I could. On your redlining section, I think it's the 4th page, we're at At the very top of the fourth page there, B zone, temporary minor special events are allowed in, and they list C1, 2, 3 in1 zones, SPA zones that allow non-residential use, and then immediately you cross off the SP11 zone, which was a topic of conversation over the years because it's up and down Pier Avenue on both sides. You've eliminated that. That means it is allowed in that zone then.
So it was duplicative, so previously it said SPA and then SPA 11.
Right.
So it's adequately covered, so it's just streamlining it.
Right. So there was a problem with not allowing certain things in SB 11. By crossing that out in this section, it allows the action, the special events to happen in SB 11. Thank you. Well, I would certainly start off by making a motion to deal with the time of the events and to coordinate that timing for these events, one or the other, to be the same as this sound or the noise ordinance. Yes, sir.
Commissioner Fleury,
Yeah.
Chair. The last time that we had a lengthy markup, we did, rather than making formal motions, we had kind of a lightning round of
okay. I agree.
consensus. And I'm going to suggest to the chair that perhaps we start with, and we literally go page by page. And on each page, if there's something that we want to change, we see if there's a majority consensus.
You want to go to the
I think that's
red
fine.
line or the proposed?
Yeah, the red line is easier.
And I do, yeah, to your point, I do think probably 90% of what is suggested will be
Easier to
consented
read on the red line? Or the other?
Staff, which would you prefer, since you're going to be the recipient of this beautiful work
Either.
product?
As long as I know which one you're working from, either works.
Okay, well, I would suggest we go from the actual resolution.
Okay.
Since that's what I'm going to sign. And then if people need to refer to the red line, we can jump back and forth.
Okay, so we have pages 4 through 16?
Yes, so let's do, you're going to test my eyesight here. Okay, I'm assuming there's no problem with page 4. Anyone? No? Okay, page 5. Section 5 is essential. Why don't we go section by section at least? So section 5 is definitions. I'm assuming, does anyone have any questions or changes on section 5, the definitions?
No.
No.
Okay.
Except that I would still raise, I'm still unclear what constitutes an incidental use. Is an art sale at a studio an incidental use? I just, but okay,
What page is that on?
it's, well, on
5.
A5 in the definitions there. All right, but anyway, that's just me being me.
Do you have a suggested edit to it?
I don't. I mean,
Touche.
I guess the red line is the, but okay.
Does the red line offer us a clue?
No, I mean, I'd redline the whole thing, but okay. Temporary uses. So on page 6, there's a question about the 1 year.
Yes. And that's the one that needs to be modified to say something about,
So this is on A2, under residence? Is that what you're- Okay.
Yep.
I'll look to staff. Should we change that so it says Well, so should we just strike the 1 year upon expiration of the building permit? Is that what we're saying? Because that language is in there, but the 1 year is,
We'd have
Be
to
the first
strike out
trigger.
1 year and then say whatever occurs first.
But if, Chair, if I may, if it's the will of the commission to just sync up with the building permit, correct? So
Yes.
however long it is, so it would be something in the temporary use permit, shall last the length of the validly issued existing building permit. Or shall last the life of the building permit.
well, it just seems like we could strike like 3 or 4 words here. So temporary use may be approved for up to 1 year or until expiration of the building permit. Correct?
But why have 1 year at all? How about
Yeah.
just
Well, that's what I'm
until
saying,
the-
just
yeah,
strike
until
the 1 year.
Expiration of the building permit.
Temporary use permit may be approved or will be approved until, or will be effective until expiration of the building permit, period.
Period. And then get rid of whatever occurs first.
And I heard some discussion and just want to know if we want to put some qualifying language that speaks to what Vice Chairperson Hirsch was mentioning about there's good faith effort to progress on the permit. Is there some qualifying language that you'd like to see there so that we don't have someone kind of exhausting the permit process and making very little progress?
We would. I'm trying to think which is easier to define, good faith or incidental use. I would say, yeah, because I could see scenarios where you're living next to one of these and it's, less than ideal.
Yeah. Alexis, I apologize for interrupting. When we had this discussion earlier about how that, I thought you explained it well in terms of a permit is extended if it appears that there's active work going on. So I'd leave it to staff to craft the language. I think you understand the intent, which is we want to eliminate the 1 year. On the other hand, we don't want abuse to occur. We don't want the property essentially be abandoned and have this ramshackle trailer and the owner saying, well, I'm going to get started someday, maybe next year or something, so.
But if you have an open building permit, you can call for one inspection every 6 months. And I don't know if there's an end date to that. I'll look to staff whether there is. But you can certainly extend it. So I just want to make sure we're all aware that we are creating the opportunity for someone to temporarily be having a residence on a property that could be years-long temporary.
How about if we just use the language from the next item? Permit shall expire upon completion of the project
Yep.
or the expiration of the building permit authorizing the project.
That works for me.
Just
But I
use
think
that.
what Vice Chair is saying, like, the expiration of the building permit could be slow to come. I mean, we could just change 1 year to 2 years. Or, put a cap on it. I'm sympathetic to what you're saying because I can see scenarios where it drags out and you're trying to get inside the head of someone and what their GC is telling them, et cetera. So I would be okay changing the 1 year to 2 years. Does that, can I get a,
Can I read the other one out loud? The permit shall expire upon completion of construction project or the expiration of the building permit authorizing the construction project.
I don't think that addresses
Oh, okay.
the Vice Chair's concern, but I don't want to speak on your behalf.
I think in most situations, somebody wants to be done with construction as soon as possible, but there are certainly situations people lose funding and they don't have the money to finish the project, but they don't want to officially close it and they want to try and fundraise. There are situations like that we are just exposing ourselves to if we tie this to expiration of the building permit.
And question for staff, if we set a limit on there, 1 year or 2 year, they can apply for an extension, right, or another permit?
Yeah, they could apply for another permit, but it would be subject to the director's determination.
Right, so which would then open up, are they operating in good faith, are they a nuisance, et cetera? Maybe I just like my words, but if we change the 1 year to 2 year, I think that would put a cap on it while also providing, some reasonable discretion.
That makes sense to me.
Okay, very good.
I'm comfortable with that. I mean, Steve got his own case. I know somebody who had a construction project that had a porta potty sitting there for longer than a year in a project that was conducted in good faith, and that's just the way construction is. 1 year's not enough anymore.
Can I be clear on what you just said then? Just all we're going to do is change the 1 to 2 and leave the last part of the sentence
Right.
alone?
Correct,
Yep.
correct.
Okay.
Okay.
If council feels different, they can edit it, but I think we're moving in the right direction. Next, okay, so we're still on temporary uses. We are all the way to page 7. Any thoughts on this, as well as getting into exempt temporary uses?
Well, Chair, I'm going to make my pitch again. I don't understand why the city's picking on the poor little M1 district. What this says is they can't do anything outside. They can't have any music. They can't have any alcohol.
Okay.
We're on temporary uses.
Hang on one quick second. Just in
Temporary
terms
uses.
of exempt temporary uses, I appreciate the energy, but I want to finish B before we get to C. That's okay, that's okay.
I'm at the bottom of the page.
Does anyone, I'll call on you first, does anyone have any issues with this B exempt temporary uses?
No.
No.
All right. We
Yeah,
move to
okay.
C, temporary events. All right, Steve, have at it.
Okay. I'm hoping, again, the poor little M1 district. Whatever they're doing, they're restricted to doing it inside. They can't have music. They can't have strobe lights. They can't have anything above capacity authorized by the fire code. If they want to have music, if they want to have alcohol, then they, like anybody else, can apply for a temporary minor special event, which is number 2. So I contend that one, limited events, which applies only to the M1 district, is useless. Doesn't regulate anything, doesn't need to be there.
I agree.
So if they wanted to have a permit, or if they want to have an event that, at what point would they cross the threshold of needing a permit? It would have to be something that was
If they wanted to serve wine,
outdoors.
if they wanted to have music, if they wanted to have wine for an opening night event, then they, like anybody else, apply for a temporary minor special event permit, which allows them to serve alcohol, which allows them to have music under a certain number of hours. It says you can have that in the M1 zone.
Well, there's an additional, if we get past page 7, but you go into page 8, the restrictions are, especially number D, where the city is asking this special event, because if they serve alcohol, it's no longer in their business.
Well, restricted days, though, the number of people that they invite for their grand opening of this art exhibit, they're not having alcohol. They can't have more people than the fire code allows. They can't have any music. They're going to be invisible to everybody outside. So this section's not needed. Now, if they want to have music, if they want to have alcohol, then they apply for the special minor events permit.
If I can interject, just.
Yeah, absolutely.
In terms of the light industrial zone, the uses that are permitted there by right, and even until, even if it's discretionary, assembly uses really were not contemplated there. So I believe that limited event was created to give them capacity to have lower scale events, not involving alcohol, to facilitate the gallery showings, display of artwork without alcohol, and for a longer permit duration. So without, and that seems to have been the mechanism without changing the underlying zoning.
I'm going
That
to
was used
suggest
at that
when
time.
we should update the zoning code then instead.
I agree with you.
So then we don't need this
this-
limited events when we update the zoning code.
How would you update it to allow assembly events down there? What are you proposing to change the zoning,
Well, so, and so I want to, once again,
which is beyond our scope?
Correct,
And
right now.
We're going to get
Yeah, that's fine, yeah, yeah.
admonition from council. So we got to sort of hit the ball where it's pitched. So we have the current zoning, and then we have what's in front of us.
Right, so we're working within the existing framework. So I understand the inclination to kind of correct it based on maybe some future direction, but at this point, I think staff would ask for you to consider keeping it, given the other framework, the underlying zoning, as this does create the potential for someone to get approval for up to 2 years to have low-impact events. They're paying one fee, 36 events a year. They are they are low intensity in general as compared to temporary minor special events.
Well, but I understand both applications are going to cost about the same. Both are going to take the same amount of time. Let them, so therefore there's no lesser burden for them going through the special minor events application process. They both
Right.
take the same amount of time. They both cost the same.
and so, and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that your point is well taken and most likely accurate. What this does is it allows them more flexibility, right? So they have both the limited events route to go, with your point well taken that, hey, that may not be the best event, it still takes a long time to apply and still could be costly. They can also then avail themselves to the temporary minor special event process in addition to that. So your point's well taken that, hey, from a practical standpoint, you may want to just do the temporary minor special event, but if you exhaust those, then you can still have a fallback, so to speak, of the limited events, albeit without the amplified music, alcohol, et cetera. Did I get that right, Madam Planning Manager?
Can you clarify for me, because we're restricting, obviously, the occupancy to not exceed the maximum occupancy load of the business's interior? Are the businesses further restricted than maximum occupancy currently? Like, how are we switching into a conversation around assembly if they already have their uses permitted?
So the uses in the zone are not necessarily synonymous with what a building occupancy may be able to permit. So the uses, there's no assembly land uses that are permitted. There's artist studios, there's manufacturing. None of the zoning uses accommodate the assembly of a show or art gallery. That isn't an enumerated use, and the way the zoning code works means it's not permitted, and their business license is for, art production or, pottery and so there's no mechanism under the current regulations to allow for this type of use.
So eliminating this section would essentially be providing further restrictions on them rather than keeping it.
Correct.
I disagree. it's going to cost them $600 whether they get number one or whether they get number two. It's going to cost them X number of weeks whether they get number one or number two.
Number one, the limited event permits it for 2 years. So they have an allowance for 2 years, right? A temporary minor special event has a 12-month. So there is a benefit in terms of the duration of the permit. They are given parameters in which they have to operate, but it's a 2-year permit.
It's not perfect, but I'm inclined to keep the language generally as is for the M1. I don't know who's,
Well, the letter that came from the M1 group speaks to all the outdoor frequency, prohibited days, temporary uses, adjusted event hours, amplified sound, alcohol, addresses every single one of them that is prohibited in the proposal that we have in front of us. So if we think that M1 is getting the short end of the stick, why don't we just refer back to the issues that they feel they'd like to have down and see if we agree with that?
Well, my own perspective on this, I think I made clear. For example, G, music, noise, no music, okay, I don't think I would be inclined to delete that. The alcohol, I'd be inclined to delete that.
Would be inclined to delete it, meaning you would allow it. Is that what I'm hearing?
I would delete that. I would delete the noise thing. I would delete the parking thing.
Yeah.
And other than that, I think I'm okay with the way it's
I
written.
agree. Those are the big three that we're talking about, the hours of operation, the alcohol.
And some of this, like we were talking about the issue with the maximum occupancy, whether there's no discretion in that in any building in any use. So, I mean, that's not a additional code, it's just a restatement of an existing condition.
so if we eliminate, let me just make sure I understand. So if we eliminate the alcohol I,
Or permit the alcohol.
no, that's, yeah, so if we eliminate, there's a section that says no alcohol service
Right.
during limited nights. So if we strike that language, what is their flexibility regarding
Thank you.
alcohol? They can serve it
Correct, they would then,
anytime, like,
yeah, then be allowed to serve alcohol. Gee, are you guys getting feedback?
but they would still be limited by the number of events, so they couldn't.
Correct, by
so like
the limited
open
events.
pour. All right, fair enough. Parking, yeah, that feels a little heavy. Okay, so you want to strike I, alcohol, K, parking, and what else, sir?
The G, no music. I would allow them to have music.
Yep.
Yeah. So that would be,
Then
that would be governed
consistent with
by
the
the noise ordinance.
Yeah.
How about C? Maximum 3 hours. Can we do better than 3 hours for the event?
Yeah, I mean, well,
Well, what would you want? 4?
no, again, it's one of those things where if you have a business that's operating there from 8 to 5, and they want to have a special event during that 8 to 5, I'm not sure I have a problem with that. And we're limiting the number of days, and I think I just would delete the hours restriction.
I mean,
I suggest 5. They don't have to use 5, but I'd give them the flexibility of 5.
So 5 hours. Okay, so what I have on the floor is C, frequency changing 3 hours to 5 hours, striking I, striking K, striking G. I can support that. I know Pete can, it's his idea. Do others support it? Mike?
Do we
Well,
have-
I'm supportive of all that, but I'd like to talk about, if you've been to any of the events down in that area, the events indeed go past their business hours. I mean, they're not 10 o'clock at night events, but they're evening events. And at one time, we were talking about, and not on M1, but we were talking about bringing the hours of operation for these special events, not just to be within their normal operating hours, but up to 10 o'clock at night. So 10 o'clock at night is outside most of the operating hours of the M1 district. So if this is a special permit, and I recognize it's different from the other permit, very much so.
So you're saying, oops. So you're saying on F, you would want to change that to 10? Is that what you're saying? Or not later than 10 p.m.?
How would you change that specifically?
I would, again, it goes along with the noise ordinance.
So,
Not
so
earlier
give me
than,
some language here. Not earlier than 10, not later than 10, so 10 to 10?
That'd be fine with me. Or noise ordinance is actually 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock, 8 a.m. to 8.
Okay, I'm okay, 8 to 10. And maybe change it so it says within the hours of 8 a.m. to 10 p.m.
Right,
Do we have at least?
with a 5-hour maximum.
Okay. I think we've got 4 people in agreement with that, and at 9:15, I'm okay with that. So, so frequency, I know, right? So frequency, we'll change the 3 hours to 5 hours. G will be stricken, I will be stricken, K will be stricken.
If you don't speak to music by striking it, are they allowed to do it?
They are governed by the noise ordinance.
Well, not amplified music, is it?
Is your intent to allow amplified or entertainment in
Yes.
accordance with the noise ordinance?
Yes.
Please? Okay, I would suggest that we don't strike it completely, but
Okay,
clarify that
All right, do you have-
entertainment may be permitted
Right.
in accordance with the noise ordinance.
okay. How,
Oh.
do you have specific language, Sarah? Should it just say music? Music and speaking may be amplified as long as event noise
Yeah.
is not audible at the property line?
Correct, and we understand the
Boom.
direction
All right.
from the.
Do we have consensus there?
Yeah, do you want
May
to
not
use,
mean unanimity, but consensus.
yes.
Yes.
do you want to, yes, do you want to use the language that's in the special I in the temporary special events for noise? It's called entertainment, but it's essentially really talking about noise.
What page is that on?
10 in the middle.
Okay.
With, of course, the addition of 5 hours and then the different hours, or no?
Yeah.
Was your,
Yeah, why don't we just change, can you just plagiarize that? Page 10, item I, entertainment, can you,
And is it music and speaking? We want to clarify that that's maybe, or we want to just,
co-op that? I think if we took that I, entertainment, and put it into G, and also call that entertainment, like, we already have a noise ordinance, so I feel like positively labeling it as music as opposed to noise would be a step in the right direction.
But to clarify, changing the hours to be 8 a.m. to 10 p.m.
8 a.m. to 10
And
p.m.
5 hours in a
Yeah.
day.
We're keeping D
We
with the new language that was proposed for the other event.
We are keeping D.
And one's looking pretty good now.
I think that's fair given what the
Right.
permitted use is and what it's zoned for currently.
4D, though, do we have to make a change to staff's suggestion that police department wanted this to be?
That is at your discretion, that is staff's recommendation.
What language, I'm confused as to what language you want to swap out.
So it would be that for all other dates than the holidays, they may be restricted, and that the holidays would be outright prohibited. However, if you would also like to give us direction to work with the police department and review the data and make a recommendation at city council, I think that can also be accommodated.
Oh,
I'm okay. Go ahead.
I'm the one that brought this up, and I feel like now that we've opened up the restrictions on this, I'm more inclined to defer to staff and police department.
That's fine. I mean, the way it's worded, the fact that it says may be restricted, et cetera, on any date, I think it's fine, and I'm willing to defer to staff on any reasonable adjustments to that. I mean, I think, to me, the critical question is not only the day, but like, is it something incremental that brings in new people towards an added load, or is it just like people are already in town, they're walking by, and they're like, hey, let's, check this event out. So I think that gives the chief ability to do that, so.
Yeah, well, except that we just had 3 different times indicated that they disagreed with that. And with all due respect, when Adam was standing in front of us and said, I'm not sure, I don't want to paraphrase, I'm not sure what when we talked to him, he was sitting right there looking at it with a puzzled look on it, the captain was. There didn't seem to me to be any discretion on those holiday dates. I mean, I'm good with the first sentence, but the second sentence, if I'm going to follow the advice of the representative of the police department, that would be St. Patrick's Day, et cetera, they are not permitted or are prohibited.
I just don't understand why we have such hardwired restricted language if
I would concur.
If the chief of police has discretion, he has discretion, he can clamp down on it if he wants to, but he doesn't have to. Your language would say, or what we were perhaps hearing from PD, was that they want it hardwired in there.
Right.
Correct, to avoid the various applications and, hey, this is why it's okay, and et cetera, et cetera.
I see.
In the past, the issue was always that those dates, not only are we impacted, but so are all of our mutual aid responders. That if in fact there is an incident on Cinco de Mayo, we're not going to be able to rely upon Redondo and Hermosa and the sheriff's department in the way that historically we do, because they are also going to be impacted. That was the rationale that we've had in the past.
That's true. I'll defer
One
to
last-
staff on that based on their discussions with PD.
So my last bite at that would be that this restricted days is going to apply not only to this section, but the next section we talk about. And that's going to be, they'll rewrite this particular statement to reflect that it is, used in your words, hardwired for certain days and possibly additional days if the police department feels that they could be overpowered. So it could be a volleyball tournament with 20,000 people that they'll then ask you to deny a permit for either the special events or the temporary events.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's
It'll
the
be
first sentence.
rewritten to that. Okay,
The first sentence already says that, essentially. It's the second sentence that just needs to be rewritten.
right.
And you want to rewrite it to,
Indicate that special events are not permitted,
Yes.
or are, whatever the right language is. That's Pat's job, right?
Understand. Those will be.
if that's what
hardwired.
PD wants, we'll go with that for now, and obviously council can take a swing at it. Okay, we are just ripping through this.
And can I, sorry, quick
Yeah.
Clarification, K is struck. Parking, is that
Parking,
correct?
yes.
If I is struck and we're just being silent on alcohol, does that just imply alcohol is allowed?
No, it does not. The zone has absolutely no underlying right for alcohol, so I think it would be better if the intent is to allow events to add clarifying language that with a, I think a temporary use permit probably speaks to it, regulations about alcohol, that if you have a permit from ABC, alcohol may be served or sold or consumed.
Yeah,
I'm good with that.
that's the intention.
Yep.
All right. Are we clear on that?
To respond to Commissioner Hirsch, though, the question about parking, it doesn't seem to me that these should require a parking management plan. That would be just deleted,
Yeah.
that part of this.
Agreed.
Agreed.
All right, so we're good on the M1?
Yep.
Okay. So temporary, beginning on page 8, temporary minor special events. We've sort of been stealing their language here. What are people's thoughts on that?
I'd like to duplicate the hours that we did in M1. So reflecting on an 8 to 10 rather than the 10 to 8 or 10 to 9, reflect the businesses are allowed to have these special events equal during the noise ordinance timeframe. So that just addresses the noise.
So you're talking about like in G?
So this would be G, so that lower right box would go from 8 to 10.
And the restricted E needs to be rewritten in the same language as the previous one?
Whoa, okay.
They talk about D frequency.
We're about to.
Oh, okay.
What are thoughts on that? We have 18 days. Obviously, it's a chosen number. We could have more. We could change the consecutive days. What's the consensus on that?
I would propose that we change it to be up to 36 days, but no more than 18 in separate events. So you could have 18 events up to 2 days each.
All right, we have that on the floor.
I'm sorry, Kate, Commissioner Kate, could you please repeat that?
Sure, I would propose that events may occur up to 36 days in any 12-month period, not to exceed 18 unique events, if that makes sense.
What's the last part? I'm sorry, not to
Not to
exceed?
exceed 18 unique events.
So where it says with a maximum of 2 events per month, we could put and 18 per year.
Yeah.
Okay. I would be okay with that.
I'm sorry, my math is failing me. If it's 36 days, you're proposing 36 days as opposed to 18 in the first sentence in any 12-month period. If you had a maximum of 3 events per month, that would be times 12 months is your 36 months. I mean, your 36 events. Do you want a maximum of 2 events a month? I mean, you can't have 2 now. You have to up that to either 3 or 4.
You could still have 2 events per month, and you could have 18 events per year, and you can have 36 days per year.
I'm sorry I'm so dense. If you have 2 events per month, that's a maximum of 24.
But your event could be 2 to 3 days, 1, 2, or 3 days.
You can have 3-day events.
Okay, well, it already says 3 consecutive days.
Yep.
I guess.
But right now, the way it's written, it says 18 days total. If I wanted all my events to be 3 days each, then I would only be able to have 6 events in a year. Because it's 18 divided by 3. And I'm suggesting to change it to,
I read that differently. If it's 3 consecutive days per event, and you have 18 events, then it's 3 times 18 for the total number of days.
But you
it's
don't
saying
have to have
18
3-day
days.
events. You could have 2-day events.
Right.
and it's saying 18 days, not 18 events.
Correct, yeah, so Madam Chair has it as, at least how we intended it to be drafted. So it's basically saying you could have a 3-day event, but you only get 18, as drafted currently, a total of 18 days for the entire year. And what Madam Vice Chair is saying is she wants to expand that to 36 days with, as you said, the one caveat that you can have no more than 18 total events.
Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Said more eloquently, thank you.
Okay, so D frequency, 18 becomes 36. After the word month, we add or and 12 per year. Right?
I was suggesting 18 per
18 per year, okay, sorry. Okay, I'm on board with that. I know you are. We have,
I'm good with,
okay. The powerful play moves on. Restricted days, we've already had plenty of discussion on that. G, hours, we've discussed.
Do we have to memorialize, though, we want these restricted days to match what we agreed to for the,
I believe Commissioner Hoffman already
Yeah,
noted that.
okay, got it.
Yeah, we're,
And real quick on frequency, the other parameters about maximum 3 and the 5 days between events, is that still to be maintained? Just for clarification. Okay, thank you.
I would say yes. All right, who's got I'm kind of scrolling here through page 10 and 11. Does anyone else have modifications to what is proposed?
Parking, is there any interest from my fellow
Yeah, what was
commissioners
that? Yeah,
on Q, parking?
yes.
I had previously suggested trying to increase the threshold for parking lots having to come up with a,
parking plan.
a parking plan, thank you.
I mean, how burdensome is a parking plan? I mean, is that like, can that be as simple as like a one-page, we encourage this, or does it require something more robust?
It can take different forms. So if someone had valet, they may have to describe how that's going to operate, where if they had off-site parking, which is something someone used recently, they had a letter of authorization from the other business that was closed during that time, indicating that they could use, and that was the extent of it. So it just, yeah, it could be as simple as a one-page memo with detailed information of how they're going to offset the displaced parking.
Do we think that the parking needs in M1 area are different than the parking needs on Pier Avenue? Hermosa Avenue?
Well, M1
Yes.
was previously, for the other section, was limited to indoor uses. This one has outdoor. So I don't know if that's where you were going. That's what I was.
Well, I am. Parking, a parking plan, the reason why you have a parking plan in, outside the M1 on Hermosa Avenue may be the size of or the site itself and what it's doing.
I mean, I'm okay with what we did on M1 because it tends to be smaller events. I'm okay with generally what we have, having some degree of parking plan for, or comments on parking for temporary minor special events. Are you suggesting like not having any parking dialogue or?
Well, originally, these two documents, the reason why it was so restrictive to the M1 is because it prohibited all these other things that we just now unprohibited. And so carrying over into the next section, we're still reasonably more restrictive in the Pier Avenue, Hermosa Avenue, commercial SP zone with other issues.
You think we're being more restrictive in the non-M1 areas?
Well,
We are, but-
they have a 2-year program versus a 1-year program. They have no parking requirements. They can do alcohol. They can, now, I mean, what we're proposing is, and so we have to now look at the other, there was a reason why the two different smaller event versus bigger event had less restrictions and more restrictions.
Right. I mean, to me, this appropriately has more restrictions or comment on it. Maybe I'm not tracking your point. Where's everyone else at on this? Stunned silence.
The stunned silence is I'm trying to think of a single parcel in any place that has a parking lot with more than 10 spaces. Are we,
They have monthly poetry readings, I believe.
I'm just trying to think where this is
All
going
the
to be.
places on,
But recall staff report updated it saying that the number would be 5 or 6, 5 and 6, not 10.
say that again, please, I'm sorry.
Staff in their presentation said that
Right.
there was an error in the language here and is suggesting that Q3 reads in a parking lot with 6 or more parking spaces.
Okay, good.
Right.
That was triggering me. The discontinuity there. Okay. I mean, I'm generally okay with it as written. If someone isn't, they want to propose new language, I'm open to that. I think it's seems reasonable. But I know there's other opinions in the room. Can we waive, I know there's a comment from a gentleman here, and can we waive ADA? Like, can we just say, like,
So I don't believe we can. But the way that it's drafted is in accordance with ADA, so that if there was an avenue to provide relief, that could be provided. More likely, I hear the concern that was expressed about it being impractical, and that may be the case. You may have to have a new temporary accessible space set up in order to accommodate your event and the ADA. So there would be some flexibility there, but it's not necessarily a standard that we can just blanket relieve someone of providing.
okay. I know much of what we do in ADA follows federal law, so we have limited degrees of freedom there. At least that's my understanding. I'm okay with the parking section as it is. Does anyone else want to? No. Okay. Okay, I'm ripping through page 12 into page 13. Are there edits that people have, or are we in a state of unanimity here? Permit hours, PD refund. I'm looking through, I took reasonably good notes while people were saying some of the things that they wanted to change or address. I know there was some concern about fees, our ability to refund all or part of that. I know that was also voiced by Kathy Knoll earlier in her letter. Where is that, or is that, fees are not our purview, correct?
Fees are not necessarily the purview of the planning commission. We did add some language as to the modification. If you want to make a recommendation for city council to consider waiving fees, we can work that into this staff report as part of your recommendation.
Okay, is there, so it would not be in the code here, but it would be part of your report?
Correct. If in your motion you want to add that to staff to make a recommendation that city council.
I mean, I would like to have some flexibility on fees for permits that are denied, yeah. I mean, since we can't talk about fees, it seems weird for me to throw out a number or say half, or since I don't have that.
So I would say in your, the motion, if there's consensus, would be that you would like to make the recommendation to city council that they consider a fee partial refund for permits that are denied or something to that extent, and they can determine that amount.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, we got to hear 3 yeses.
Yes.
Okay. All right. What else do we have to address, or have we covered everyone's?
Can we go back to page 13?
Of course. Specifically,
Frequency.
For the outdoor sales
for
events?
outdoor sales events.
Right.
Okay.
There is no statement like this in one area. Do we want to address it here or change it at all? I don't, but
I'm okay with this. I mean, part of the M1 was really focused on their interior space.
Right,
This is
right,
outdoor.
right.
On site, so that would be.
Would this outdoor sales event count as the total number of events? It's separate?
It's a separate
This
event
is
category, and it's applicable to non-residential zones.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm good with that, the way it is then.
Okay. Seasonal sale lots, pumpkin patches, tree lots. Any comments on that? That would be at the top of page 14. Okay, silence is approval on this one. D, exempt temporary events. Again, we get to our favorite, the word of the night, incidental. We know it when we see it, but it's difficult to define. Does anyone want to take a stab at that? Do we want to just let that roll through? And I don't know how better to define it. I'm sure we're going to hit some walls here to the extent that people use this process, but I don't know how to better define it. I appreciate throwing it back and calling them parlor games.
Yes, I do. I appreciate that word.
Seances, I don't know. So I guess if you operate a parlor, I don't know what's going on there. But anyway, maybe there's a better way to phrase that, but I'm at a loss for words at this point. I thought there was another definition elsewhere. Maybe it was in the staff report where it talked about.
It was just, there is, but we looked at that before, but it's just as difficult to discern.
But it did sort of comment on that it's aligned with and doesn't supersede the existing use or something like that. Did
Yeah,
That's
clearly,
in the definitions that you saw on
that's
page.
what, okay.
on page 5, yeah, clearly
5.
subordinate to a principal use established.
Okay, so why are we, do we need to separately define it here? Because I'm confused.
So this is clarifying that that would be exempt, and then there's a further definition to help you to help one understand. We try not to define the term in the regulation.
Okay.
So there's kind of two-pronged, they work together.
If this is the way we do it and it makes sense to you and to code enforcement, then I'm okay with it. I'm struck by the definition reads better than this, but
And if you want us to work on that a little bit, we certainly can do that.
I mean, I don't want to spend 20 minutes on it, but it does, if staff wants to kind of try to harmonize those in some way, do we have to vote on that, or is that just a directive we can give you to?
It's just direction to staff.
Yeah.
I think you could give us direction to,
Okay. Align those two in some manner. All right.
So that table on
16, 15?
on 15 would need to be
All updated.
revised to reflect all that, right?
Correct.
Yes, sir.
All right. Do we, Mr. City Attorney, in terms of what we have here, how do we
So-
construct a motion here?
Right, so rather than be repetitive, I'm good with I have them written down, Madam Planning Manager. So the motion would simply be to approve staff recommendation with all of the, aforementioned changes that a consensus of the Planning Commission agreed upon. Once again, that's just my preference. That's not, if you guys want to go piece by piece again, I'm not going to stand in the way.
That would seem repetitive. This might turn into a special event itself. Okay, so, we do need a motion, so if someone can make,
Correct.
if someone can make a motion that will hopefully be seconded specific to providing staff guidance, their recommendations subject to the consensus
Changes
comments.
made.
Yeah, Chair Peterson, I move PC Resolution 25-02 as written, however, but reflecting the consensus of the commission on the items that have been discussed, upon which council has taken extensive notes, and our acting director will accurately reflect.
I'll second.
Okay.
Friendly amendment, can we add to that it's exempt from CEQA? That it's exempt from CEQA?
Yes, and yes, thank you, sir.
Okay, friendly amendment accepted and seconded. We debate motions, or any more debate on motion? Not encouraging it, but I'm a stickler. Okay, I'll close debate and call the question.
Voting is open. Motion carries 5-0.
Boom. All right, thank you. Took a little longer than I thought it would, but that's all good. I know there was public comment, and we
We
appreciate.
missed by an hour and a half.
Yeah, if you bet the over, you won tonight. I know there's a lot of comment on this. We appreciate this. I know not everyone bats 1,000 in terms of getting what they want. This will loop back to council. I would encourage everyone that weighed in on this to also weigh in front of council so that they hear and understand. And I'm hoping that council listens to every awesome minute of this debate so that they don't have to reinvent the wheel. This is quality stuff here. All right, on to staff items. Item 8A. Do I read this or do we throw it to staff?
So this is Thank you. So this will be an opportunity for us to rotate the chairperson. And so this would normally occur where Vice Chair Hirsch would assume the chairperson position, and Commissioner Izant would rotate to the vice chairperson position.
All right, do we need a motion to that effect? I assume we do.
We should just make sure that there's no public comment online and reflecting no one in chambers.
No, there isn't.
Okay, we do not have anyone in chambers at this moment in our audience. All right, do we have we need a motion and a second on this? Anyone?
I move staff recommendation.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any debate on this? No? Okay, I don't know. There seemed to be there's just like a silence in the room here. All right, call the question if we could open up voting on that.
Voting is open. Motion carries 5-0.
All right, thank you. Congrats. Our soon-to-be Chair Hirsch and Steve Izant as well. On to item 8B, Community Development Director Report.
Good evening. So just some quick updates. We will be back in March with a full agenda, which is you have the tentative future. And we'll be starting off with not starting the meeting, but the meeting will include the study session on commercial uses. So just wanted to make that announcement. And we anticipate the zoning text amendment on the temporary use permits to go forward to the City Council on March 25th. And then before concluding, I just wanted to recognize Chair Peterson as his last meeting this evening. And thank you for your service from the Community Development Department. I know you've served since 2016, and this is your third term. We're going to miss you. You've provided thoughtful input, very constructive feedback on all the various applications that you've considered in the time that I'm here, and I've really appreciated working with you. We have a small gift of appreciation for you, for your home or office, so I'll give that to you.
Thank you.
And while we'll miss your presence here, we won't be without you completely. And so congratulations, of course, on your election to city treasurer. So we look forward to continuing to work with you in that capacity.
Thank you. Thank you. Do you have any other projects to update on, or?
Not at the moment, but if there's questions, I'm happy to entertain them.
Does anyone have
and
questions?
Comments from the
Chair, just one question. We received an email a week or two ago asking if we were available on certain dates in March, and that indicated to me that we were going to have possibly a special study session beyond our normal meeting. Is there going to be an additional date, and do we know that yet?
There will not be. We were striving to get there, but we're just not going to be ready. So it'll have to be the normal scheduled meeting in March, which is the 18th, I believe.
Thank you.
Anyone else? No? Planning Commission comments. I will start. I appreciate your comments. I've enjoyed serving. This has, it's been 9 years, 2 full terms, 1 incomplete due to my election, but I have enjoyed this. I wanted to thank city councils that appointed me. I appreciate their confidence in me, and as well my fellow commissioners, most of whom are up here given the tenure of our group other than Commissioner Rice and former Commissioner Rice and Rob Seaman. I appreciate their collaboration. I wanted to acknowledge my family for, understanding that one weekend a month I sat and read something this thick. And when I first started, the packet was the packet, and about 5:30 or 6 on Thursday night, there would be a big thump that one of my kids would hear and run and say, "Hey, the packet." That meant that Bob Rollins had come by. But I appreciate this. I know there were a ton of us that, came into this role and others as a part of the No No movement, which was really what galvanized me into a greater role in public service. So I appreciate it. I know that Kate will do great as chair. She has my public hearing script and my good wishes. I'm not hard to find. And anyway, I just thank everyone's help. This has been a great experience. And I've hit the ground running the last 10 weeks as treasurer and look forward to continuing. So thank you all. Thank you all. Any other Planning Commission comments?
Chair, I would just echo what our acting planning director said. You've been a valued colleague. The thing that I like about this commission is that we do seem to be, I would describe it as a thoughtful commission that works well together, and you certainly have provided some of that lubrication to make that happen. So I'll miss you, but you're going on to bigger and better things, and I know my money's well protected, so so thank you so much.
No, thank you. I've enjoyed collaborating with you.
I'll just step in as well. I guess I'm not the newest member on the commission anymore. But I've learned a lot from you over the last year and a half, and excited that you had the opportunity to serve our city in a new capacity. So look forward to see what you do with all your work as the city treasurer, and thank you for the time and the support on the Planning Commission.
Thank you. Good luck to you.
And I would simply add the same. This is one of those things where, I would support you to run for treasurer, but completely self-defeating. I much prefer you sitting next to us. Losing you and Marie in the same year, those are 2 really tough blows to the commission. But thank you, Dave, for everything. And the other thing, of course, you can't let it pass. Didn't matter what Dave said, it always sounded great with that voice. So thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
I would echo the same thing. Great voice, great speaking appearance, well heard. But my only advice is, as a treasurer, you got to learn a few jokes when you go in there to follow the lead. So thank you.
All right, noted. I would add that there were 8 applicants that will be interviewed by the city council, so there's no shortage of folks that apparently want this chair. And it's time on Tuesday night. So thank you again, everyone.
And those interviews are next week, right? Next week on Tuesday?
That is correct.
Yeah.
The 25th. And then you'll have a new colleague in March. Future agenda items, are there any comments on that, or I believe we need to move and second the approval of that?
The only comment I had, some of them been our.
Mike.
The future agenda items have appeared, November, December, and January, and now they're back on almost at the same time for the March meeting. So Is there, you think that's going to happen?
Yes, I believe they will.
Okay.
And just to add some color to the reason, there's been a variety, some of which have been at the applicant's request.
Yeah.
So others, we're pushing to try to move things forward, and for whatever reason, the applicant may not have resubmitted. So we're on hold, but we're always looking forward and trying to get them scheduled. So there's a variety of reasons of why that happens. So.
Thank you.
All right. Is there a motion?
Move to receive and file.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and second to receive and file the future agenda items for March 18th. I will call the question and
Voting is open.
cast my final vote here.
That's a pretty pathetic, I think that was the most important action.
Been putting things on your plate. All right, voting is in progress.
Yeah, but I just lost my, can't believe it.
I had a joke, I'd tell it.
Now,
It's coming back on. Here we go.
Three treasurers are walking down the street. Two of
Motion
them run into a
carries.
bar, the third one ducks.
Motion carries 5-0.
All right, motion carried. We do not have a need for further public comment. Might I have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, all right. Good night. Thank you.